Hi everyone, this is Tracy Malone, the founder of NarcissistAbuseSupport.com. Today, I've got a wonderful guest. Bree Bonchay is a licensed psychotherapist, and she has been dealing with victims of narcissistic abuse for a really long time. And she is the founder of World Narcissist Abuse Awareness Day. This is an event that goes on in June every year. It's a free summit, and there's so much information. She's been interviewing the very, very tops in this industry, and I'm so honored to have been part of her event this year. But today we're going to talk about a really important topic that we both see in our practices so much. People like come to us, and I was one of them, she was one of them, we were just discussing it, that we didn't know we were a victim of abuse. And how do we know if we are? And then sort of how do we make sure we're not again? So without any further ado, let me get ready, and we're going to welcome Bree, and we're going to talk to her about how to stop and figure out why we were targets and how to know that we were actually abused. So without any further ado, let's welcome Bree. Hi there, Bree. Thank you so much for joining me.
Well, thank you for having me.
So Bree, tell me about World Narcissist Abuse Awareness Day.
I'd love to. So I wanted a day that would really just sort of honor survivors and be able to help spread awareness globally and hopefully affect change and in our legal system and our family courts. So about 4 years ago, I decided that I would just create this day and in a way to sort of like really make the day special and big and get the word out. I decided to hold a telesummit on that day, and I contacted people who were really pretty big in the field, who had talking a lot about narcissistic abuse, and I got everybody all in one day and had the telesummit. And it's been really awesome. I never expected it to just grow to what it's grown to. I have over like 30,000 people attending the summit. It's all over the world. It's amazing. And it's really great to be able to give something. It's free. So the survivor community for that day, I should say, it's free for that, for 24 or 48 hours, however long, that survivors can listen to this amazing content, the latest content from all the, top professionals, psychologists, lawyers, coaches, advocates, everybody in the field of narcissistic abuse. And they get to hear all this content for free. And all these people who do the summit are they're doing it because it's a mission for them as well, to help heal other people. So it's just an amazing event. I've met wonderful people. I've met you. And so it's great. And I hope that anybody who's listening will go to my site and check it out.
We'll give the URL to that later, but World Narcissist Abuse Awareness Day saved my life. And it really helped me at the very beginning of my journey to understand things. And, we can all go to YouTube all the time and pick up 30,000 videos any day we want to, but your videos are just honed in specific topics, and they really help everybody, no matter where they are in the spectrum. This is a really good lead into us, because we're going to talk about people and who have been victims, if you would, survivors, if they can, they get to that point. But how do they know if they're like suffering from narcissistic abuse? So these relationships could not only be a relationship like a marriage or a romantic relationship, but it could be their parents. For me, I didn't know until I was 50 years old that all of this was happening, and that I had been a victim my whole life. How do people know? How can you guide us here?
Yeah, well, I thought it would be a really great topic, because it's probably one of the questions that I get asked the most. And, people will usually write me, and they'll write me pretty lengthy emails and ask me, Bree, how can I tell if I've been abused? Am I in an abusive relationship? Is my partner, mother, whoever, a narcissist? And they'll give me a pretty, long, detailed description of the relationship, about what happened, and and then want that confirmation from me, or want my opinion to help them determine if they're in an abusive relationship. And so, and interestingly, when I read the emails, if anybody were to read the emails, it's pretty blatant stuff, right? The stuff that they write about is pretty blatant abuse. It's, really awful name calling or cheating. And, but when you're in an abusive relationship, those dynamics really erode your ability to tell if you're being abused. And so that's one thing going on. And one way that I can really tell, and I think it's the most common and most telling sign that somebody's been abused, is if they've experienced cognitive dissonance. And so when I read in their letters, in their emails to me, and they say stuff like, this person's done, and they'll list some horrible things, but I don't know, am I in an abusive relationship? You can really see the cognitive dissonance they're experiencing, and, not having, two opposing beliefs about the person they're with. Let's say it's a partner, on one hand, they're telling me about all the awful things this person has done, and the other hand, they're saying, I don't know if this person is abusive. Is this person a narcissist? So cognitive dissonance, I think, is probably the most telling and most common sign. And just so people kind of have an idea of cognitive dissonance, and it's not just cognitive dissonance. Well, I should back up. So cognitive dissonance is really, I think it's just for people who've been in abusive relationships, because if you've been in a relationship with somebody who isn't disordered, you can come out, like a divorce or a really bad breakup can cause you to be traumatized, right? And the person doesn't need to be disordered. You could, if you feel like you are overwhelmed, your ability to cope is overwhelmed, that maybe you felt powerless about the decision to break up or divorce, and maybe you feel like, and which is really common, you feel like your sense of self is shattered, like who you are, who am I? I used to be this person's wife, and now who am I? Those are all elements of trauma. So you can come out of a relationship with somebody who's not disordered and still experience trauma, but you won't have the cognitive dissonance. Because what's unique to abusive relationships is that the abuser has that Jekyll and Hyde personality. And the characteristics of that relationship cause a really kind of unpredictable, changing environment that you just really never know what's going to happen. And that's what causes the cognitive dissonance.
So can you give us an explanation of cognitive dissonance? Because it is very, it's a very confusing process. It's what is reality? Can you give us a more formal explanation of that?
Yes, of what cognitive dissonance is. So basically, just real simply, it's when you have two completely opposing or opposite beliefs. It could even be more than two, and you hold them at the same time. And so what it does is, when your beliefs and your thinking is not aligned, then it causes a lot of tension and a lot of anxiety and anguish in people. And so, and a lot of survivors, in fact, that is probably the number one thing when they come out of relationships that they complain about, right? That's like a horrible symptom, is this horrible cognitive dissonance that they feel about their partner, their ex-partner, and the relationship. Do you see that as
I
well?
totally understand. I wanted you to give a good example because I knew it would be better than mine. But I think for what I have seen with people is the narcissistic partner or disordered partner is giving them that mixed message of the public face and the private face, right? This is where you're like, wait, we were just at a party and he was telling everyone how great I am, and then I get home and I'm being verbally abused and called names. And then, you know, as soon as you sink down, then they turn around and it's just this cycle, and you're just like, am I good? Am I bad? Did I do? And they blame you for things that aren't your fault, and then you get confused, and it's just so overwhelming for people. I think the masks are such a big important part. I would love to talk about that because, you know, we have the flavors of narcissists. So you've got the overt, the covert, the, you know, malignant, there's a whole realm of things that they could be, but each one of those can have a performance mask. You know, if you've got the covert narcissist and they're going to be, you know, pretending to be a great dad by being the soccer coach or being the Girl Scout mom, and then they get in the car and they're yelling and screaming and they hate their kids and ignore them when they go home. You're sitting there in that same, like, what is the real person? And then they of course explain the behavior at home with, I'm tired, I don't always have to be on, or something like that. And then we go, oh, okay. But it's so confusing because where was the good parent that everyone thinks is great, right?
Yeah, I mean, and that's that Jekyll and Hyde persona that really creates so much of it, creates the trauma bond and the cognitive dissonance that really just makes people feel so uncertain, you know, that they feel so confused. And what happens, you know, over time, you know, another common symptom of, you know, people who are abused, narcissistically abused, is self-doubt. They have a horrible, they're plagued with horrible self-doubt. And that is because of these dynamics and gaslighting, which is a huge pattern in these relationships, that lying and denying, which creates a lot of uncertainty, a lot of confusion. It distorts people's reality. So they don't know which way is up anymore. And over time, they become really, I think you lose your self-esteem, you lose your self-worth, you lose your ability to trust your own judgment. And, you know, and that's when they start to even lose the ability to discern if they're in an abusive relationship.
Right. And also I think that the misconception of abuse that falls under the someone punched me in the face, at least they weren't doing that. At least they didn't go there. So, you know, I didn't understand that passive aggressive behaviors and silent treatment and all of the other, you know, stuff that gets mixed up into here is actually a punish and reward system. It's punish you if you did this, I'm not going to talk to you. And then if you do what I say, I'll be nice to you. And it becomes this, you have to win their love. And you know, when you look at the question of, you know, how do we know we didn't see this, right? If you are having to win someone's love and you're being punished with, you know, the silent treatment or passive aggressive sulking and, you know, just making your life miserable, making every holiday miserable, you know, that's not normal, and it's not okay. But when people lose themselves, they've lost themselves because they've lost the ability usually to speak up. They tried and they tried, and every time they did, they just were put down and made small. And then eventually they just say, I'm not even going to fight anymore. I'm not going to try to set a boundary. I've lost myself.
And that's another one of the signs or the ways people can tell. And that's what you're describing is learned helplessness. You know, that feeling that, and it's an incorrect feeling, but it's a feeling that no matter, that there's no way to escape. There's no way of changing anything. So you're just not going to try anymore. And, you know, the reason why they feel it is everything you said. And it's, you know, correct. It's like, well, they've tried to do everything, and they've bent like a pretzel. They've twisted like a pretzel. They've thought of and done everything they can to try to make the relationship better, try to make it back to when the honeymoon, period was, and nothing's worked. And so they give up. They stop trying, and they just, and that's also a very, very sad thing, because learned helplessness is usually like the first stop before depression, before anxiety, and then, like you said, it's a lot. You're losing yourself because you're not present for yourself.
I have a quote that I put out there, I think on Instagram, but it's about boundaries. And I say to people that it's better to try to set boundaries regardless of the possible outcome when you're with a narcissist. Because when we stop setting boundaries, when we stop standing up for ourselves, that's when they win and we lost ourselves. We just give up, and that's bad. So keep on trying to set those boundaries, people, regardless of whether or not they're listening, because if you give up, they're going to know they won, and it's only going to get worse, I promise you.
And that's so true. And I think what happens is that over time, because people's self-esteem is so eroded, their reality is so distorted, that they start to believe, and that everything is their fault. And it doesn't help that the narcissist is telling them it's your fault too. So they start to take blame for everything, and that right there is where they lose their ability to set the boundaries, right? Because it's their fault. I should have done this. Maybe I should have said it that way. If only I did. And
exactly. So tell me how there are people in my life who have never had this happen, where I've had it repeated my entire life. I had a narcissistic parent, so I didn't recognize the signs. So when I married it and dated it, it was just natural for me. And so who are the victims? Was there a general, I don't want to say we're all codependent. I never like a broad stroke like that, but is there something that makes us a better target than others?
Well, I believe there is. I did not have narcissistic parents. I had a pretty normal childhood, and I think I probably picked a pattern of narcissistic men in my life. And so when it happened to me, like really severely, and each one was probably worse than the last, right? So after the last relationship, that really kind of shook me up, and I'm like, what, I did a lot of soul searching, a lot of reflection, a lot of introspection, because I'm the common denominator, right? I didn't deserve it. I didn't do anything to cause it, but I am in this equation somehow. And so I believe that there are certain personality traits that are common to survivors that definitely make us more susceptible to these relationships. And actually, Sandra Brown has done research on survivors, actual research, and she, using the Big Five personality test, and she has, identified what these traits are. And so if people want, they can Google that and do more learning about that. But the two that I saw myself, I see in all my clients are conscientiousness and agreeableness. And I think if you have, I know survivors out there, even if you're came from a family that had a narcissistic parent, or if you didn't, no matter what your background is, you probably have these traits. And so when we think of conscientiousness, we think of people who are really organized, right? They're planners. They are achievement oriented. They, when they say give you their word, you can count on it, right? And they're not quitters. So an example, there's obviously lots of facets of how this personality trait sort of sets people up for these relationships. And I should say that these are actually really great qualities, but just not in the presence of manipulative, toxic, disordered people.
I always say to people that it has to be a balance. And when I have my groups, I say, okay, give me the percentage of how much you did in the relationship. And it's always up here or off the charts. And what they did is here. You know, a balance is what you're looking for. And I think, you know, when we are that giver, that sort of people pleaser or the conscientious person, we are going to keep trying and trying. And that's what they love about us. We're like tasty morsels of someone that they can mold and abuse because, oh, we'll help you, we'll fix you, we'll keep trying harder. If you tell us we're doing it wrong, we'll keep trying harder. That's the conscientious part about this, is they're looking for someone that is going to be a giver because they need to take. And so they need a giver. And so those are really part of this whole equation.
And somebody who, like you're saying, that's just not going to give up. I mean, a conscientious person, when they commit to something, whatever it is, they're going to put their 100% into it. And it works against them, because if it was in a relationship with a non-disordered person, it would be wonderful, right? You give it your all, you're going to make this work, hell or high water, you're going to do it. But with a disordered person, it really works against this trait. Really works against the survivor. And then I wanted to talk about cooperation, because a lot of survivors, you'll hear them say, well, I'm just empathetic. It's my empathy. So they zero in on that one little trait of empathy, but it's really more than that. It's under sort of the other big 5 trait of cooperation, which would be somebody who's trusting, somebody who's empathetic, somebody who doesn't like confrontation. I hear that from my clients all the time. They're great people, they're strong people, but they just, they're not confrontational people. They don't like it. And so those traits, it's kind of obvious how those can sort of work against a survivor in a relationship with a disordered person.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, because I've always broken it down by the trust in your subcategories. I love that those are the 2 hierarchy of like, these are the traits. But
I see them the most.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I see those the most in my clients. Those are pretty universal.
Absolutely. I mean, I think I could check every box for most of the victims I talk with. But how does someone not be a target again?
Yeah, so I mean, this I think is so important, because what happens and what I see in my practice is, people come in, they're devastated, they're feeling horrible, they start, they work with you, they start to heal. And when people feel better, they're like, great, I feel better, I'm going to move on now. And a lot of times that, people think that, okay, I've learned all the warning signs, the red flags. I pretty much have my, doctorate degree in narcissistic personality disorder with all the research and information. And, I'm well armed. I can go out now. I'll be able to spot it. I'll be able to protect myself. This is the problem. The problem is you still have these traits, right? You're still over the top cooperative. You're still over the top conscientious. We're not talking, average. You have high normal. So what happens is, it's like having laws without policemen to enforce it, right? So what will happen is they'll go back out there, and they won't be they might see something. They might see a red flag. They might see some sign, or something will ring a bell in their knowledge, but they have like poor boundary enforcement. It's not that they have bad boundaries so much, but poor boundary enforcement. And that's because they're seeing through their traits. So what happens is, a narcissist might say something, and they could be, oh, that could be like, oh, they're kind of playing the victim. But then their empathy, their trusting nature, they're seeing people the way through themselves. Like, well, I don't lie, so this person, they're still seeing people and viewing people and interacting with the world with these traits. So to answer your question, I kind of went off on a tangent there, but to answer your question, it's really to, you know, at the last piece, the really important piece is to work on these traits, not change them. There's nothing wrong with them. But to, what I tell my clients is like to build filters on them, like filters of protection, because that temper these traits until you really know somebody, till somebody's really earned your trust, and you know them, and then you can sort of, you know, relax.
I have a course on my website called Change the Story. And my philosophy is that our story gives the abuser clues to what we have tolerated before. So it's the same thing. It's protecting those good qualities and not sharing them, or, you know, stepping back and watching more than we react. And, you know, love at first sight is fine, but wait 6 months before you decide if this is really what it is, because you'll see the colors, right? The whole point of a narcissist love bombing and rushing everything is so that you don't get a chance to ever see the real them. You're in this whirlwind. It's, oh my God, it's so fast. Slow down and watch more, and don't give them the information. Say, you know, my husband cheated on me 15 times, but I stayed because I'm loyal and I believe in my vows, and I'm going to be there for someone. You've just given them a roadmap to go and abuse you and cheat on you. And the normal person is going to say, that's really weird. She's allowing him, and she didn't do anything. What'd she do to stop him? And a narcissist, I have a little green flag here, literally goes, oh, awesome, I can cheat, green flag. They're sitting there counting the things when they do this interrogation to see what you've tolerated, where you've been, and how strong were you. If you had strong boundaries, they're not going to want you. So they're looking for the one that they can. It's like the antelopes running across the field in the in National Geographic. They don't go for the strong one. They go for the guy at the back. And not that we are the guy at the back, but we are the ones that are so caring and loving, and we can fix them. And that is a vulnerability that they're going to exploit.
Absolutely. It made me think of something that happened with a client of mine, and it just kind of illustrates this point. She was in a professional relationship with some guy, and anyway, it doesn't matter who it was. Anyway, he would say things to her, you know, a little flirty, a little, you know, that made her feel uncomfortable. This was a professional working relationship. And so what she did, because she's cooperative, because she's conscientious, and she didn't want any confrontation or make him feel embarrassed, or, you know, didn't want to make him feel bad, she just ignored it. But this is the thing. He was a narcissist, and her ignoring it was not standing up for himself or herself. So he continued to do it. And then it snowballed. It got very bad. And so she's like, I don't understand like what I could have done different. And so that's what will happen if you don't if you don't practice that confrontation right when you first see something that is bothering you. And this is what we do in relationships, right? We let it go. Well, it's not that big of a deal, or, you know, or we assume good intentions, right? And if we don't kind of nip it in the butt the minute we see it, narcissistic people will continue to do it and continue and continue and continue until you now have a really big problem.
And I think there's a line of delusion there. So she's not playing into his game, but because she didn't stop him, the narcissist takes it as permission. And they're going, oh, okay. And then they have this delusion that there's like this whole big thing that, no, just because I didn't say anything didn't mean I wanted it. But they really, like, they don't.
They take it as weakness.
Take it as weakness, and they see, oh, okay, I can get away with it. So I think it's important for people to really understand their own strengths and their own vulnerabilities, because vulnerabilities are going to be on display when you have that first coffee date. And, you know, if it's not a romantic relationship, when you're first being tested, if you would, they are sitting there and throwing out little tests like, where do you want to go for dinner today? oh, I don't care, wherever you want to go. And you go, that's being agreeable, right? But the reality is they're going, oh, she don't have any opinion, I could walk all over her, right? So
Yes, exactly.
things that we have to realize if we don't speak up and learn to speak up sooner. Yes, we might risk this relationship not going forward, but if that person is going to leave because you had a voice, get the hell out now.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
So I want to thank you so much, Bree, for being here and talking about this today. You are a wealth of information. People can still go to your website and World Narcissist Abuse Awareness Day, right? Is it the initials?
Well, they can, I have two. I have my blog, and that is Free from Toxic. So they can go there. And they can go to World Narcissistic Abuse Awareness Day, or easier, just WNAAD.com. And they can check out all the summits and all the good information on that site.
Thank you so much. And thank you for letting me be on your summit this year. It was such an honor, and it has validated my work so much. People like look at your event as like the gold star. And if I could get like a little gold star for my page and go, look, I spoke there. It was such an honor. And I am so happy to have you as a friend in my life to help the rest of the world. So thank you for being here.
I feel the same way about you. Thank you, Tracy.